This week we're answering your top questions about us dropping our Cummins 6.7s in the Detroit holes and why Blaine had to make custom mounts. We are also answering your questions about why we use 2 mufflers instead of 1, how we're mounting our huge alternator, and why we chose steel over aluminum for the engine mounts. We'll also share yard costs, engine tuning plans, and a few comments that gave us a good laugh. So let's get started.
Hey guys, I hope you guys are happy you finally got to see the Cummins going in the boat. Now I know that you guys have been asking for that for a while, and I know you were probably sort of sad to see that they're not running yet. Well, there's a lot more to do before then. So stay tuned, keep watching, because we got lots of stuff coming up. Some of it's pretty technical. Hope you guys will enjoy it, but let's get to it. First question of the day is from Bobby Gibson 3586. You have room for a water maker now. We've always had a water maker. It actually came with the boat, and I believe we've already done a video on that one on this channel. If you go back a few videos, you can see we rebuilt the whole thing, got it all up and running, because that was one of the really important things for us to be moving on board, is to have water making capability. So didn't work when we got the boat, works now. Okay, so we had Rob Deaton, 9910, ask. He says, I'm sure being in the boatyard can be trying, especially in the Northwest weather being like it is. What was it costing per month to be there? Well, fortunately at Steveston, which is municipally run, so it's not a private yard, so sadly private yards can get a little pricey because, hey, they're there to make money, and that's just how the world works, right? Steveston is municipally run, so that means it's all government. It's catered around the fishing industry. So a lot of the pricing is much, much less. For this boat, at 78 feet long, we were paying roughly around $40 a day. Just to give you a comparison, one of our local yards, Canoe Cove Marina, love Canoe Cove, I actually used to work there. They're around $120 a day. So if we're just doing a quick in and out for bottom paint, Canoe Cove is great for us. If we're going in for a big project like this, Steveston is the way to go, because the amount of money saved is so big. Next question's from Dave Barton, UL3XW. When you tune the engines, are you going to have multiple tunes for performance mode and economy mode? While I could with that ECU, I won't. Fortunately on boats, namely this boat, there's really not much of a need for it. We're not asking for a lot of power out of these engines. They're capped with the ECU at about 250 horsepower each, and at that kind of horsepower level, everything's based around the economy. We're looking for the absolute best fuel burn we can get, and that's the main thing that matters. And we're not asking for a lot of power, it's easy to do that. However, we do have the ECU tuning video that's going to be coming up soon. We're going to get a little bit more into depth of all that technical stuff. It's where I geek out, and hopefully you guys will enjoy that one as well.
By the way, everyone, I'm going to interrupt Blaine just a little bit. Thank you to all of you who have already checked out our new website. We are having so much fun on there. I'm even thinking about doing a private Discord, which will be like so much better. You just have direct access to Blaine and I. Check it out by June 8th. If you join by June 8th, we have a contest. You can win one of 3 kind of cool Tangaroa coffee to go mugs that we've designed. You can only win them this way, but check it out, and we're going to put a promo code right there.
We've got another question here from Mr. Dave Barton, and he asked, also, is the big alternator going to be on its own separate belt? That's the plan. They are big alternators, and in full load, they can pull a pretty good bit of juice. I think those are rated at a 330 amp continuous, which is a lot. They're like 95 pound alternators. These things are gigantic. And to try to run that off of the existing accessory belt just wouldn't work out. We'd have too much belt slip. I don't think I could get enough wrap on it, and it just put a lot of load on that belt. So yes, that's going to be mounted off the front of the engine, and there will be a separate mandrel and pulley driving that alternator. All right, next up is from Liam Greenwood. Is aluminum not strong enough for the mounts? I wouldn't say that aluminum isn't strong enough. It would be strong enough. However, obviously your thicknesses are going to have to be bigger than what you would with the steel. Aluminum doesn't have the same strength per mass as steel does. And another problem with aluminum is that its the amount of amperage required to weld aluminum is substantially higher. So if my welder's not able to do the steel, aluminum's going to be even worse. And some people might say, wait a minute, aluminum melts at a lower temperature than steel does. That's true. The problem with aluminum is that it gets rid of its heat really fast. So as you're trying to get a puddle forming and get your weld going, all that heat's just getting spread out to the rest of the metal. So it actually requires substantially more amperage than what steel does. So my welder would have no chance making that mount out of aluminum. Liam Greenwood also asked, could you have rented a beefier welder to do the final welds after tacking with your welder? Yes, absolutely could have. What we found though is, surprisingly enough, Vancouver is a huge city. And when we left Victoria, I thought to myself, you know what, we're going to a big city, there's going to be all this stuff available. And there was for the most part. But unfortunately, Vancouver is a big city and all the places are spread out throughout this gigantic city. And when you start driving through Vancouver, like, you're talking hours at times. Traffic is nuts some places. It's just difficult to get anything. So yes, I could have got a welder, probably could have worked, but you know what? Jim at Action Welding was right there. Prices were good for him. So while I was working on something else, he just finished up the welding for me. So it gave me the ability to actually get more done anyway. So Norris Harrington 3332 asked, where is your fire extinguisher? Great question. And the answer is, it was always right there. Anytime that I'm welding down in the engine room, there's typically one sitting right by the door to the engine room, 3 feet away from me. So we always have one, and even with that, there's others all over the boat. So we've got lots of fire extinguisher happening on board. And if you look back to some of our older videos, we actually show where we did have a fire while I was welding underneath the boat, and we had a guy on fire watch ready to go during that one.
Checked out fire, and the pin for the fire extinguisher was bent.
Oh, look at all the smoke in there.
Yeah.
So what caused the fire, Blaine?
Yeah, we're hopping out. That's why I had him in there.
What caused the fire?
Well, it's just I'm welding right by in the bilge area. So it just got hot enough to light off a little bit of something in the bilge.
You okay? Did you burn yourself?
No, pulling the pin.
Pull the pin out.
I bent the entire pin out, trying to pull it out.
Holy powder!
Yeah.
Okay, we have a little bit of fire extinguisher powder right here.
That's why I didn't want you to do that, is he? Yeah. Hang on a second. Oh, that's going to be fun to clean out. And the aftermath of the slight bilge fire. This is all the powder that's left down in the bilge. I'll have to get that out because I'm pretty sure that's a bit caustic for aluminum. So I'm going to vacuum that out right now. Question from Zoe R86, and I get this question a lot. People are really, really interested on this one. Why not combine the two engines into one muffler? So at first glance, that would seem a great idea, especially with the mufflers we had, because they were made for the Detroits and they have 2 entries into the mufflers. The problem is for starters, ABYC says no for that, and they're the sanctioning body, or not sanctioning body, they make the guidelines for proper installations of various things, pretty much everything throughout the boat. And the reason for that is that there's always going to be one set of valves that are going to be in overlap on any engine. So let's say, for example, we're cruising along and I've got to put one engine in neutral or shut one engine off. That exhaust from the other engine has now got a path to backfeed through into the engine room. So that's a big no-no. Obviously, we can all agree on that one. So yeah, while it seems like a good idea at first, it's really not. You can do some sort of valving and such, but it just turns into a nightmare at that point, and you might as well just have 2 mufflers. Next question is from Jet Driver. Did you strip out all the old loose wiring and rewire the boat, or at least the engine room, as part of the install? We did a lot. There was a ton of wire that came out. One of the things that was major on that is those old Detroits were mechanical diesels. You would be shocked at the amount of wires that went to them. There were 2 bundles probably that big around, and they were all the gauge wiring. Analog gauges straight from the engine room all the way up to the pilot house. So these 2 massive piles of gray cable got reefed out because the new engines are going to be running different setups for that. Now you'll see some of the stuff on the other side of the engine room, the big heavy red and black cables. A lot of that is all the DC cabling for the inverters. The inverters and all of the Blue Victron equipment on the back wall, that's just a temporary mounting for that stuff. It's all going to get moved. The breaker panels are going to get moved. So a lot of that's going to kind of stay as is for a little bit. I'll tidy it up and zap strap it up a little bit better. But unfortunately, I can't get rid of it all yet, or at least not make it permanent yet, because there's just too many things that are in flux, and I got to get that done before I tackle that. Swedish Chef asks, are the motor mounts pretty similar? So when the first one was made, could you copy but mirror it? Unfortunately, not quite the same enough. There are slight differences in bed heights and shaft layouts and whatnot. So couldn't quite do it that way. I think it was like maybe a 1/2 inch difference between port and starboard. So things had to shift to make up for that. So no, as nice as that would have been, I mean, honestly, to be able to have done all of that from waterjet, like draw it up on CAD and have it all burned out, would have saved me an immense amount of cutting and frustration. But no, I couldn't do that, unfortunately, and that's why we did it the way we did. Next question's from Ken Feltman. If you're going through all this trouble to make custom engine mounts, why not powder coat? That's a good question. Powder coating obviously works great. It seals everything up really well. The biggest issue that we have up here is that most of the places that do things like that are booked way out. We're talking typically weeks, and we just didn't have the time for that. We were on a time crunch the entire yard visit, and that just wasn't feasible for us. So trim-clad it was. Next up, we have a question from Kinsiller9208. Janice, what time of the day is appropriate to talk about full penetration? Let's just say in the boatyard you need as much amusement as possible to keep yourself going. You'll see in videos in the future, yeah. LOL. Blaine, how did you fasten the motor mounts? I thought you said dissimilar metals could not touch each other, steel and aluminum. Did you put an isolating material, plastic, composite, rubber in between? So the motor mounts that we have, I'm fairly certain that they were aluminum to begin with, but the one big thing is steel and aluminum is not so bad. There's not near as much galvanic action there, just because steel is not quite as active of a metal. At least that's what I've taken out of it. Even the old original steel mounts that were on there from the Detroits, there was no major corrosion underneath. But like I said, I think the new ones are aluminum on the cage anyway, so no, we didn't bother putting anything underneath. Okay, we have a question from Kimbrew1822. Did you ever test start the engines? No. We went full send on this operation. Basically, the engines weren't set up to test start before they went in the boat. There was a lot of wiring that had to be done in place. Some other things like exhaust manifolding that we didn't have ready yet. It wasn't practical to start them before they went in the boat. So like I said, we went full send and we didn't test start them until we were actually back in the water. Next question's from Andy Guest 6543.
By the way, Andy makes a lot of comments, and Andy, we really appreciate it. It makes me recording him so much easier, so thank you very much. Okay, back to Blaine.
So question was, why the same names for the new engines? Did you not fancy something new to go with them? Steve and Paul, or Stacy and Polly maybe? Too late to change now, I guess. Where did the names come from other than port and starboard? Thanks for another great video. Honestly, I think we were just sitting around. There were probably beers involved, maybe a cider for Janice. And Portia and Stella just kind of popped and they resonated with us and we just liked them. We didn't want to get rid of them. So Portia and Stella 2.0. Okay, we got a question here from Up North Uper 1196. What is the horsepower and torque of the engines? That's a bit of a loaded question. So being these are truck engines, they would have naturally come with, I think, like 300 horsepower, somewhere around in there, and 800 foot-pounds of torque. The thing is they were built with components directly off of a serial number for a QSB 550, which is the biggest horsepower motor that these came with in the marine sector. What they can do and what we've got them rated at, two different things. So even though they could probably get pushed up to 500 horse or so, we've got them to be rated to around 250, because really all we're ever going to be asking out of these is like 120. So that gives us lots of extra in case of inclement conditions and not enough to damage anything. Okay, next question from Racer193WR. That's a giant weight savings in that boat. 12-cylinder Detroits are heavy in their own, let alone marinized. Maybe you save 3 tons out of the boat or more. Will you notice it in stability? So I've done a calculation on this, and I reckon we probably took out about 6,000 pounds of engine. So here's the kicker with Tangaroa, and this is the way that I usually explain it. And I'm not a naval architect, so we'll start with that. Tangaroa is not a big top-heavy boat. You look at a lot of the boats these days, they're really tall, fly bridges, all this stuff. We don't have any of that. We're aluminum as well, so there's not a lot of weight up top in the boat. And the hull construction on this boat, the lower you go on the boat, the thicker the metal is. So already the hull is heavier at the bottom. Then you have the engines down in the engine room. And then not only that, all of our tanks are in the bottom of the boat, built into the bottom of the boat as well. So we've got up front, roughly around 550 gallons of water tank. We've got 2 inboard tanks, we call them forward and mid tank. Each one of those is around 700 gallons of diesel. We've got 1 aft tank that's about 1,400 gallons of diesel. And then right next to that, we've got another water tank that's about 700 gallons worth of water. So I'm not sure how much it affects stability. We haven't noticed anything. However, what I typically do is I keep the 1 700-gallon water tank full at all times. It's not connected to anything anyway, it's just an extra tank back there. So if you calculate out the weight for water at 700 gallons, it's pretty close to what we took out on the engine, so works well for a ballast for the boat. So that's what I'm doing until I can talk to a naval architect and maybe run some numbers and see exactly where we're sitting. Horseshoe 182 asks, when are the surface drives going in? Okay, that's a pretty funny one. I don't know if all of you know what surface drives are. They're also known as Arneson drives, and you see them on kind of a lot of the new fast, bigger yacht, not a lot, a few of the fast, bigger yachts, a lot of fast, smaller boats. And they're basically shafts that stick out of the back of the boat, and they've got really sharp, gnarly looking blades on the props. And what they are is they're a surface piercing propeller. So when you're full bore, you have less drag because half of the propeller is out of the water and half of the propeller is in the water. So it's just wild. You really got to check it out. So look up Arneson drive. They're pretty wild. As for us getting them, I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future. Richard G8651 asks, was it necessary to remove the washer and dryer, or was it a choice to have the maximum empty space and reinstall them later? So we had no history on the washer and dryer. They seemed fairly new, but we had no idea how old they were. And we knew from the dryer, which was already gone, that they had to disassemble all of them to get them in there in the first place. And the reason why the dryer wasn't there is because when they reassembled them, they pinched a wire. And I found that out by one day I was leaning against the dryer when I was working on something and got a tingle on my arm, which is never good when you're on an aluminum boat. That's really unsafe. So it went. I just disassembled it. It was gone same day, I think, maybe a few days later. But anyhow, we had no history on them, and we figured you can't get them in the boat without disassembling them unless that hatch is off. So if we're going to do it, the time was now, and that's what we did.
We also had a deal. So Blaine and I made a deal that if I allowed his lithium batteries to come up into the wheelhouse, he cleared out that engine room, then he would give me room for a washer and dryer. So we kind of did a little bit of a trade. So the whole lithium bank came up into the living quarters area. So I got my washer and dryer in the engine room.
Next question from ML50486965. That's a big one. I know you have a lot of expenses, but how much would a better welder cost? Quite a bit, actually. I like my Miller welders. I've always bought them, and I've never had a problem with them, so I tend to stick to what I know. A new welder that would have done the amperages that we need to do probably would have been around the $7,000 range, possibly even more once you add in water cooling and things like that, because when you get up to those amperages, you need to have cooled torches if you're welding at high duty cycles, because they get hot. So yeah, not in the budget, at least not yet. Maybe in the future sometime, but no. All right, that brings us to the question comment of the day. This is from Miso Soup 777. Really enjoy your videos. Blaine is an artist, Janice is a card, and your boat name reminds me of the enchanted tiki room at Disneyland every time you release a video. Tangaroa, I am Tangaroa, father of all gods and goddesses. Here in this land of enchantment I appear before you as a mighty tree. Stand back, O mystic powers, hear my call. From my limbs let new life fall. Okay, we've been to the enchanted tiki room at Disneyland. I don't know how many others have been there. It's quite a show. I'd recommend it. And honestly, like, we had a laugh, and that song has been stuck in our head for days now. So thank you very much for that. That was a good laugh, and that concludes our question and answer for this week. So stay tuned for this week's video, which is going to be based around all the configuration changes that I had to make to the belt assembly. A few things to do there, and it should be a pretty good one, I think. And if you're not subscribed, please do, and we'll see you next week. In the tiki room, in the tiki. You're not adding enough tikis. You need one more tiki.
No, it's only 4 tikis.
No, 5 tikis.
In the tiki room.
That was 5 tikis. In the tiki room, in the tiki.
If you missed the video these questions are from, check out We Mounted Cummins 6.7s in our Detroit 12V71 sized holes. It's where we finally set the engines and started turning plans into reality.